The Leave Your Legacy podcast is supported by Wise Financial. Wise Financial is a Northwestern Mutual private client group member. For over 20 years, Wise Financial has dedicated its efforts to designing comprehensive wealth management strategies for business owners and many accomplished athletes. Through their efforts, Wise Financial has been recognized as an industry-leading firm. The Northwestern Mutual Life Insurance Company, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Hello, and welcome to the Leave Your Legacy podcast. I'm your host, Kenyon Murray, and today we have a very accomplished author who, as a family, we got to know her when she did a piece on Keegan. Welcome to the show, Mirin Fader. How are you doing today?
I'm good. It's nice to see you again. Thanks for having me back.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, I think, you did a lot in capturing Keegan's personality and kind of his makeup going into it. So I think having you on the show, one, for our family is a big thank you to what the article that you wrote. It was awesome. But, one of the things, even for me, is like a little bit of your backstory because, where you grew up, your family, those kind of things. So could you tell our audience a little bit about where you grew up and what makes Mirin Mirin?
Yeah, I mean, it's so funny, right? The roles are reversed. Like we spent hours with you guys, like talking about you guys, and now it's on me. So thank you for that. Yeah. Yes, I grew up in Los Angeles, and it's funny. I'm like one of the only it feels like I'm one of the only non-transplants. Like I actually grew up here.
Yeah.
And I was really young when I found basketball, and my parents were so supportive of it, which is funny because I'm really short and I wanted to be in the WNBA, and they were like, yes, go for it. So yeah, I didn't even think of writing, I wanted to be a basketball player, like the drive, the determination. Like I spent so much of, my childhood just playing and like being one of the guys, and my parents were all for it, which was amazing. So yeah, it was weird. It's like the first day I played basketball, I just knew like I wanted my life to be around basketball.
Wow.
And looking back, it seems so crazy, right? How do you know when you're that young? But I really did. I felt like I was supposed to do this. I was terrible. Let's be honest. I could not make a shot, but I loved it so much. I was like, I have to do this in some capacity.
Oh, that's awesome. And I think, you talk about playing early, and you uniquely were the only girl on a boys basketball team. So I wanted to ask, like, first of all, your parents were like, okay, let's go do this. And then second of all, like, what did your teammates and the other parents think about that? Because I know in today's world, it's probably a little bit more accepted, but yeah, how was that being the only girl on a boys team?
No, it was really hard. And the thing is like, I only did it because there wasn't girls teams. Like it was the school team that I went to, and then also a club team, but for the school team. And it's funny because it was like a crash course in what is Title IX. They told me they were trying to explain to me like Title IX is this thing, and we also don't have this team. So that's why you can be on this boys team. And I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm like 10 years old,
yeah.
But I was like, fine, I get to play basketball. And they were all like, what is she doing here? Like, I didn't have the cool shoes. Like I had like Payless shoes, and they were just like, who is she? Like, she sucks. But I was like really tough. And one practice, this guy who ended up playing D1 football. He like tackled me on a play, and I had to go to the ER, and it was horrible. But this guy on my team, I like gained his respect. He said, man, you really took that hit. Like the next day when I was back at school. So I felt like I was finally accepted on the team. I went from like, who is this girl trying to play to like, oh, she's tough. So that like really stuck with me. Honestly, it was like a badge of honor. I'm still friends with him to this day. So it's really funny.
Oh, that's awesome. And so you said you weren't very good. You couldn't make a shot. Now, how long did you play? Did you play in high school?
We improved.
Yeah, you improved. Okay.
Yeah. No, I played throughout all high school. I played AAU travel ball. It was like my whole life. I played my first year in college. I went to Lewis and Clark College in Oregon my first year, and I played there. And then I stopped playing after that. But oh my gosh, like basketball, it colored my whole life. Like I really didn't even think of being a writer. But I did have a lot of injuries in basketball. And of course, being small was always like a huge uphill battle.
Right.
But I just kept trying and kept playing because I loved it so much, like nothing in my life ever felt as good.
Wow. That's awesome. My basketball career did not start that way. So I mean, kudos to you for doing that, sticking with it. But it leads into our the next question is, okay, so you said basketball is what you wanted to do. You didn't see yourself as a writer. So what was it that kind of made that shift for you to go into writing? Obviously, you're very accomplished and very good at it, but you had a long road, and as a female kind of working through this whole sports area as far as writing goes, it's got to be tough too. But yeah, what got you to thinking about becoming a writer?
Yeah, it was tough. I mean, I think it was, first of all, a lot of injuries. Like my basketball career wasn't going where I wanted it to go. You know, you work 10 years for this thing and then it just doesn't happen. And after, my first year playing in college, I was just like, you reach that sobering moment where you're just like, I could keep trying. I could keep transferring. I could try to somehow play somewhere and then go overseas. And I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. It's not happening. Like I pushed it as far as it could go. Yeah. And at the same time in college, I was really falling in love with reading and writing. I took this woman writers class at my first college, and it so inspired me. And it's funny because the first day the teacher was like, women aren't supposed to hold the pen. And it really took me back to those days in elementary school of like, oh, you're not supposed to be on the team because like you're the only girl.
Right.
It sort of had that challenge to me, like, oh, like women aren't supposed to do this. And I loved that. And so the more I got into it, the more I realized like I actually really love writing. And I had written this whole time in my diary. That was one of my favorite hobbies. I just never thought of it as a career. Middle school, high school, like writing was my best subject. But again, like who thinks they're going to grow up and become a writer? Well, right. Who thinks they're going to grow up and become a basketball player? That's another thing. Right. But I have like two improbable dreams. So then when basketball was over, I had a really, really tough time with it because it felt like an identity crisis. It was like, well, who am I if not a basketball player? And I was like, well, what if I combine writing and basketball and I become a sports writer? And I started covering our men's basketball team at the school that I transferred to out here, Occidental College. And I just fell in love with it. I was like, wow, I get to like be in the game, like a little removed, but I get to be on the court. Yeah. And then my first job at the Orange County Register, they assigned me all these sports I knew nothing about, like water polo and like lacrosse. And I was like, yes, I do know water polo. I do know lacrosse. Didn't know a thing. Yeah. And you go and then you realize, oh, it's about the person. It's not about the sport. And that's when I was like, I want to become a sports writer and I want to write really thoughtful pieces about athletes. It doesn't have to be basketball, but that's what originally got me into it.
No, it's awesome. And I think, you talked about it even in that class where say women aren't supposed to hold the pen. And was that class being taught by a woman that said that to you? Like, yeah. Those are the kind of things that one can discourage someone from doing that because it's like, okay, you're teaching this class and you're telling me I'm not supposed to do this, but obviously your stick-to-itiveness and everything and your passion was something that continued to push you. But what are some of the roadblocks that you that happened upon you? Because I know like your writing is like you said, it's about the person. You're very thoughtful. You bring out people's inner beauty in a lot of what you do. And so sometimes that's not as sexy as right. What we call clickbait, right? Or whatever. But
right.
But yeah, just tell us a little bit about some of the hurdles you run into and then why you take such a personal angle when you talk about when you write about the athletes and people that you write about.
I'm glad you asked this because I think people have a vision of long form and my career that it feels like the red carpet has just, oh, you just get to write these long stories in your bathtub at your leisure. Like it was really hard. It's not the thing that people want, right? They wanted this. I was right at the cusp. So I graduated college in 2013 and it was like newspapers were sort of like almost dead, but not quite dead. And it was all about like clickbait slideshows and the Orange County Register, I was the only woman. I made the least amount of money. I was the lowest of the totem pole. Like I was covering little league sports. Like it took a really long time just to cover junior college men's basketball. Mm-hmm. And I just was not moving up and it didn't matter how well my stories were received. Like I was just like stuck and it was really hard. And at the same time, I was freelancing for ESPN and Bleacher Report, and I was sort of getting my name out there and I was good enough to freelance, but neither of them were hiring me. So I felt like, I'm close to my dream and extremely far. Like clearly I'm capable of writing for national outlets, but I can't get the job. So what's wrong with me? So it felt that was really hard. And then I got laid off at the Orange County Register after 4 years. And so there it was like such a moment of, well, what am I going to do? Like, how am I even going to pursue this career? And so for a couple months, I was just full-time freelancing for Bleacher Report and ESPN. And the break finally came when they sent me to Lithuania to cover LaMelo Ball when LeVar pulled him out of high school and everyone was like, what is he doing in Lithuania? And so I went there for a month and that was like my break and I got hired after that. But I think to your other question of like, why the human stories? Because I know what it is to be an athlete and I know how hard it is. And I know the struggle and how hard you have to work just to even get like a sliver of a chance to quote, make it. And LaMelo in Lithuania, like it wasn't this glamorous thing that people thought. It was really hard for both of us. We're both from California. We both don't know seasons and weather. It was freezing and in the middle of nowhere. And so it's like, but that story taught you so much about what it's like to be in his shoes and how hard it is. And so I just think when you write these stories that have a human dimension, there's something about it that can bring somebody that knows nothing about the sport to care about the person. You can just reach so many more people. And I just think I felt it myself, the way people dehumanize athletes. And they're just, oh, you're injured. Okay, you don't matter anymore. You don't exist. Right. And so I always knew that like, if I was able to make it as a sports writer, like I wouldn't write stories like that. Like I would actually try to get to know them and their journey. If you notice, all my pieces are journey. Yeah. How did you get from A to B? So that's just what interests me.
Oh, that's awesome. So, I mean, it rolls right into what I was going to ask you next about what's the most exotic or maybe remote place that you've ever done an interview, like where you've been. So, I mean, Lithuania, I don't know, is that the craziest place you've been to do a story?
It was crazy. It definitely was. And it like, if you remember, those games were live streamed on Facebook. And so people were seeing it and thinking it was this glamorous thing, but it was just in the middle of nowhere. Like there wasn't much food. Like it was really, really, really isolated. But it's funny because like the word exotic reminded me the next year I followed him to Wollongong, Australia. That was gorgeous. It was like a complete 180 from Lithuania. It was this beautiful, and it was like by the ocean. I just couldn't believe like not only was he there, but I was there, you know, and it's just really cool. And I think those stories changed my career in the sense of like, I knew I had to write globally. Right. Like it's not just enough to cover athletes here. Sport is changing. It's been changing for decades. There's so much more life outside of the US. And it just, I don't know, it really changed the way I think about like what stories I want to tell. Yeah. Yeah, no, it's awesome. And I mean, your first book that you wrote on Giannis, I know my wife he is her second favorite player in the NBA now, soon to be third. Yeah, right. Exactly. Soon to be third best player or favorite player. But I mean, your book on Giannis, it was Giannis, the Improbable Rise of an NBA MVP, New York bestseller. Like, how did that come about? As far as getting the opportunity, obviously you said you had to write globally, and him coming from Greece and being an two-time MVP is phenomenal. But how did that I wouldn't say how did it land in your lap, but how did you get the opportunity to do the book? On Giannis? It was so organic in the sense of like, I was at Bleacher Report at the time and I saw, and this was before Giannis won MVPs, like he was obviously a star, but he wasn't yet like a quote superstar, like a Giannis. Like everyone in Milwaukee, of course, was obsessed with him, but he didn't quite get that national level of recognition yet. And, but obviously I knew he was amazing. And I found that one of my editors was like, his youngest brother, there's a fourth one and he's like 15 at the time. And he's at this school in Milwaukee. Like maybe you should do a story on him. And I was like, wow, I didn't even know there was a fourth one because now, of course, they're like so in the media. There's like, you see one, you see all of them. But back then they weren't, it wasn't this public display, you know? And so I was like, I wonder how hard it is to be the fourth. That
Right.
must be really hard, right? Like we talked so much about sibling dynamics with you and the kids, but like four, I mean, that's a different level of dynamic and pressure. And so I just went and I went to his house and then Giannis was there. And I was just like, what? You know, like I didn't know he was going to be there.
Yeah.
And, you know, I just spent the day like with the family reporting in. I came to do one story and it ended up being a family story. And when that story came out, I think it revealed as much about Giannis as it did about Alex, the youngest brother.
Mhm.
And then I realized like there's such an information gap here with this extraordinary person and player, and that like at the time all people really knew, he sold trinkets on the street,
Mhm.
and then he became such a amazing player in the NBA. It was like a fairy tale that had no narrative.
Right.
Like it was like one sentence, and I was like, I wonder all the stuff that happened in Greece that made him into who he is. And so it sort of came out of that feature.
Yeah.
But again, it's kind of like what we're talking about. It's like, well, this story is so much bigger than basketball. It's a human story. And I really wanted to, tell that story.
Yeah. And I wanted to ask you about that. Like, because obviously Michelle has read the book and she's always quoting different passages out of it to me and stuff like that. She loves it. But was there something that totally blew you away from that journey? I mean, if you read the book and then they even made the Disney movie, which was, I mean, there's so much that's not in the movie.
Right.
But was there something that just completely blew you away? Like maybe something like, I don't know how you made it through this to get here, but something that just your jaw dropped when you were doing the story and learning more about the family.
I mean, I think it was getting his papers. So like in Greece, you don't get birthright citizenship if you are the child of immigrants. So even though he was born there, he's not considered a citizen.
Really?
So yeah. And so the reason why he didn't play on the top two Greek clubs, which do have like a really storied history with amazing players, is because he was considered an immigrant. And so when he had an opportunity, I reported he had an opportunity to potentially go play professionally in Spain. That's when the Greek government was like, oh my God, like we need to keep him here somehow. And they dragged their feet on getting him papers for a very long time, only until it was clear like he might get drafted in the NBA or go to Spain. And reporting out that process and how reluctant they were to give him his papers was just astounding. And if you notice in the book, I tell the stories of other really talented Black Greek players of children of immigrants. They never got their papers. And so they never got to ascend the way Giannis did. And it was really important to get to know them and include their stories to show like, yes, Giannis is extraordinary in every way. He's talented, he's deserving, he's amazing. Could not happen to a better human being. But there were others that were really good too, maybe not blessed with his size and athleticism, never got the chance to ascend because of the politics of this country. So I think just like exploring the politics and the racism in Greece was so critical to the book. And I felt like it just wasn't being talked about in this fairy tale narrative.
Right. I mean, most people probably think like he's the first one, but he wasn't.
Right.
The struggles and the path that these others tried to go along, I mean, honestly, in some way, shape, or form, kind of paved his way to be able to do it. And obviously, it's become this humongous thing, and he's this incredible player, arguably the best player in the world. So what do you think makes Giannis a superstar in a league of superstars?
I mean, it has to do with the mental, because although there's very few people that can physically do what he does, right? Like we have to acknowledge the gift, the talent. He's timeless.
Yeah.
He's a timeless player. I don't care what anybody says. Like he would do well anywhere,
Right.
anywhere. It's the scarcity mindset. I'm afraid to lose everything.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see that in other superstars. Like he had a quote recently about like, I'm desperate. I'm afraid to lose it all. And I think like in the book, I reported like him and his brothers used to have this thing they'd say to each other was like, what if we woke up and everything we got is gone?
Mm.
It was this dream, and they would laugh. It was a joke, but it wasn't really a joke. It was a very real sense of like, what if we woke up and every good thing in our lives was gone? I think when you carry that and you play with that, it's a different type of hunger. It's a different type of relentlessness. It's a different type of mental focus and discipline. And I just don't see other superstars that have that like he does.
Yeah. I think it's a mentality. I was just talking to my production team. Like, it's a mentality that like a lot of probably American-born athletes don't have, and there's a humbleness to it, but there's also, you can see that he's always striving to be better, and he mentions that a lot. Like, I got to keep working, which brings me to what you did with Keegan, right? You spent a lot of time with Keegan doing the story. His was a little bit different path than most top 10 lottery picks take. And I know my kid, but what was something about him that, I don't know, that you talked to him about, or he said to you that you're like, he's got a chance to be really special? Because I didn't know he was a first round pick until probably January of last year, right? Like, it's trying to like, okay, but I know you got to know him a little bit. What was something about him that you're like, okay, I think this kid had a chance to make it?
I was just in awe of the maturity when he said like praise. I think he said like praise is worse than criticism or something like that in the piece.
Mm-hmm.
And I just had to pause for a second when he said that to me, because like, I can't tell you how many, because I profile a lot of younger basketball players too, people that are very much praised in ways that Keegan was not.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a level of like, I don't want to say obsession with oneself, but narcissism.
Mm-hmm.
And Keegan had the opposite. And he was so convinced that like, not only do I not need praise, but it's a bad thing and I don't want it. And because I know who I am. And when Keegan walks in a room, like he had this quiet confidence that I so loved. And that was different. And that's what actually drew me to him and wanted to do the profile. And so when I saw it in person, I was really moved by that, because I think praise does hurt a lot of people, because then when they don't perform well and they're criticized, they have no idea. It's destabilizing because they're so used to being praised. I really didn't realize how tough Keegan's journey was to get there.
Yeah.
I knew he was unheralded, right? But when we talked about it and got through it, I was like, wow, this was not easy. The move, all the stuff with you and Michelle, like there was just so much going on that I didn't realize. The other thing was I was so endeared to him because he gave me Giannis vibes in the sense of like, he was like, yeah, I've never had sushi or, avocado and whatever. I'll just go get groceries with my first paycheck. And, I don't know, me and Crystal split a car. It was just so Giannis, like first contract, which was just like hysterical to me, because I'm looking at Keegan. I'm like, you have no idea how talented you are, because he's just this humble, and so, I was just really impressed by that.
Yeah, no, he's the same. I was just talking to the guys too. He was interviewed after he broke the record in the Portland game, and Mark Jones asked him like, "What's your playoff outfit going to be?" And Keegan's like, "The same thing it always is."
Yeah,
He goes sweatshirt and sweatpants, and we all got these UGG slippers for Christmas. All the men in the Murray house got these UGG slippers, and that's what he wears. He wears these UGG slippers, and it's people think that. They think it's great, but that's just who he is, because we never put a price on things. Like we never, like I was telling guys, like if we had extra money, we put it in experiences, like going on vacations and things like that, and being with each other. And, I think that's the one thing that he's really, money, I think, exacerbates who you are. Mm-hmm. And the thing with Keegan is these experiences that we're talking about doing, whether it's with he and Carly or with the family, like he's all on board with it because he knows like that's the things that matter. And so people say like, money will change. I'm like, you don't know my kid. Like, it's refreshing to see him be that way. But I mean, it's even more I'm even more in awe as his dad, because there's times we don't know if they're listening to us or they're paying attention. And he just, he exudes everything that we've always talked about. And family is everything to him. And like you said, like with Giannis, I think that's where I see a lot of similarities. It's like he's taken that path, and yeah, it's just fun to see. So I'm proud as a dad, but yeah, Michelle was like, she said that he gave you Giannis vibes, so that's pretty cool. That's really
Well,
cool.
do you remember the draft anecdote where Priority was like, so Keegan, what do you want to do with your suit for the draft? And he's just like, oh no. And he goes back to like shooting.
Yeah.
I just thought that was so him. And it's so Giannis vibes, you know, like
Yeah.
it's authentic. I guess what I'm trying to say is like, I felt it was really authentic. And I love that, because there's nothing worse than going to an interview with somebody who thinks that they have an inflated sense of who they are.
Right.
You get to the real beauty of someone's journey when they actually just view themselves like another human being down the street. And I think Keegan has that.
Yeah, it's funny. So, another story is All-Star Weekend. He did the Rising Stars game, which if he could have come home, he probably would have came home, but he did the game. And then they wanted him to stay for Saturday. And he's like, no, I got to go watch my sister play in the playoffs. So they left Salt Lake City Saturday morning, flew into Des Moines. He came and watched, I coach McKenna. So he came and watched the game. And then we went the next day to watch Chris. So he told him, like, I need to get home and see my brother and my sister play. I haven't seen them play all year. And that was him. And so the thing with Priority, as you say that, is they just say, Keegan, don't change. And they let the NBA know.
Yeah.
Like, there's things like, hey, like, he will not do this because that's not him. And as a dad, I'm just so proud of him that he is, as a man, he's able to stand on that and not be wavered. And yeah, I mean, it's crazy, but I think that's the quality that's going to make him a good player, or maybe even a great player for a long time in the league. So I definitely appreciate you saying that about him.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
So obviously, I mean, the Giannis book was great. I mean, is there any, and you've done a ton of articles, is there anything, do you have any huge projects on the horizon that you're working on right now?
Yes, I'm working on my second book. It's a biography of Hakeem Olajuwon.
Okay.
And, it's funny because we've covered so many bases in this conversation of like why I love the human story and basketball. And Hakeem is like the embodiment of that. Global human, beloved human, very much Giannis-like. I mean, he gave Giannis the blueprint, so it's the other way around. I'm just super excited because Hakeem doesn't get the credit for being the pioneer that he is in so many regards. You look at the league now and how many players from Africa are dominating. And, we really only talk about international superstars like Dirk, but it was Hakeem that set the example. And there's so many aspects to his story, rededication to Islam. I just think he's just a very special person. So I'm really enjoying that.
No, I loved him as a player. And that was the one thing, is like, he won with grace. And as great a player as he was, it was never about him. It was always about the team. And if you think about it, the way bigs or post players play now, he was doing that back then. I mean, he could,
100%.
So great passer, defender, like he was such a good player. So I definitely am interested in reading that one. So that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like you said, I did send you some questions. And one of the things I think, the reason why I named this podcast, the Leave Your Legacy podcast, is because I truly feel that it doesn't matter what walk of life you come from, how old you are, you're leaving a legacy for someone. You're setting an example for your peers or for your siblings or things like that. And I wanted to know, what does legacy or leaving a legacy mean to you?
I mean, for me, I think about a lot of the young women that are coming up in this field that want to be journalists, and leaving a legacy. Like, all I want is for it to be slightly easier for them, or at least, if not easier, just have the tools to do this awesome career, because it is so enjoyable. And so many women, they go into TV, which there's nothing wrong with that, but there are just so few women journalists in NBA media and sports media. And so like, if I could do anything with my legacy to help them, like that's what I care about. There's so many things, so many conversations we have, and they just tell me these stories of things they've gone through. And it breaks my heart because I'm like, how is this still happening? You know, things in media, and it's hard being a woman journalist. And so for me, like I actually am inspired by them. So when I see them hustling and getting a story like that excites me. So I think it's always about like if I forgot, it might have been Toni Morrison, who's one of my favorite writers. Like if your dream is just you, it's not big enough. Right. And so I don't want to miscredit, it might have been somebody else, but I think Toni Morrison said something along those lines. And so yeah, that's what I hope. It's funny. I'm going to the Association of Women in Sports Media conference next week in Charlotte, North Carolina. And it's always so fun because you're like, wait, there's that many of us that we could have a conference.
Yeah.
But it reminds you of your purpose. And it reminds you that like, it's not just about doing books or writing stories. It's like, what are you doing to help the next girl?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I love that. And, you know, you talk about the TV thing. I think, that's so surface level. I'm just being honest. Like, I think there are very good sideline reporters and studio reporters and things like that. But like I said before, like I really feel like the way you write really gets to the depth of the athletes that, you know, you're speaking about. You don't get that when it comes to the TV thing. Everything's about viewers and that kind of thing. So, I mean, I praise you for, you know, the great writer you are and everything that you got coming up, because, you know, like you said, you busted your tail and it's deserving, and we really like you. The Murrays really like you. So
Thank you.
Yeah. So rapid fire questions. I always ask my guests. I got a few that
Okay.
We're going to throw out at you. So if you had one place to go for a relaxing vacation, where would it be and why?
I need to go to Italy because I want all the pizza in the world.
I got you. So you know whose senior trip is going to be to Italy? McKenna's.
Are you kidding?
No, I'm not even joking.
McKenna, I'm so jealous.
Yeah. So I'm like, I said, remember, Keegan's rich. We ain't rich. So you think about that there.
Yeah.
No, yeah, but she really wants to do that. So we're doing that. And I've been to Italy, and you're right. The pizza and everything is phenomenal there. All right. So here's one. If you could write a story or a book on anyone in history, regardless of what, you know, doesn't have to be an athlete, who would it be and why?
I mean, this sounds kind of, I don't know how it sounds, but I really, really would have loved to write a Kobe book, because I think that there's such an information gap between player and then this like girls basketball like lover and coach.
Right.
We have no idea how he makes that leap and changes his life. That information is missing. Like I would love to do that. And just growing up in LA, like what Kobe meant to our community and people here. I mean, the people closest in my life are just remain obsessed with him. It's just something that like when you're from here, you just look at it a different way. And I would have loved to do that.
Yeah, no, I think, you know, you talk about seeing someone go through different chapters in their life. Like he was one. And I remember Chris and Keegan texting me when, you know, they found out. Like it was such a blow, because I mean, even there were so many people that just thought that it couldn't happen, right? Because he's such a legend, and it seems like forever ago that it happened. But I think that would be a pretty interesting book as far as that, like you said, that bridge to becoming a girl dad and that, because he completely shifted. I mean, it was all about women's basketball and girls basketball, and I mean, you don't really see that from someone in the NBA. So yeah, that would be really good, really good. Okay, last one. What is your go-to feel-good movie? Like, you know, if you're just having a down day, a movie that makes you feel good, or a song that makes you feel good.
Okay, it's definitely Janelle Monáe's I Like That, because when it came out, I was in a very specific place in my life. I
Okay.
was in Florida doing a story on Roberto Aguayo, and like it was a story that I had tried to crack for like 5 years, because
Okay.
obviously, as people know, like he was supposed to be like this amazing kicker, and then was called all, the bust and all these things. And anyway, I did this interview. I finally got it. And it was the most life-changing interview. I felt so moved by it. And then this song comes on, and I'm just like driving in Florida, and it's blasting Janelle Monáe. And I was like, what is life? Like, this is crazy that like somebody has paid me to do this.
Yeah.
I love that song so much. You can't like not listen to it and
Yeah.
feel amazing. Like, I love it.
No, I feel you on that one. I do like me some Janelle Monáe as well. All right. Well, Mirin, I want to thank you today. And I actually picked this quote because of you. Honestly, I like I talked about how you write about people and you bring out this inner beauty. So I have a quote from John Donahue. It says, "Beauty is the illumination of your soul." And when I was thinking about this and you and your writing, like that just kind of spoke to me. And I was like, that would be the perfect quote to end our podcast today. So I want to thank you for taking the time out and coming on the podcast. You're amazing. It's been amazing. Can't wait to read your new work. But I just want to say thank you. Everything you've done for our family, you may not think it's a lot, but I mean, the article you wrote, I think gave so many people an insight to who Keegan is. And maybe you want to do one about Chris too, but I'll just throw that one out there.
I've been watching. Don't worry. I've been watching.
Just throw a little plug in there. Throw a little plug.
Well, a little plug.
Oh, yeah.
He needs no plug. He killed it. But I just want to thank you. Thank you for trusting me with your family story.
Absolutely. So some great news. Like we said before, our podcast is now on the iHeartRadio platform Spreaker. We have our own YouTube channel, the Talk About Network channel on YouTube. Remember to like, subscribe, so you get the alerts when it's going to drop. You can also find our podcast on Apple Music or Spotify or wherever you get your music. So with that being said, thank you to Mirin Fader for coming on today. And until next time, I'm Kenyon Murray. This podcast is sponsored by Storyline Multimedia. Storyline is an Iowa City-based media company that specializes in creating high-quality video, photo, and audio productions for local businesses. Not only that, but they also produce a number of podcasts, including this one. So if you're interested in sharing the story of your business with the world, contact them today by visiting StorylineMultimedia.com. And remember, your story matters.